What's up, Bitcoin Radio? This is your host, Joe Blackburn. You're listening to the Bitcoin Hour, and we have one of my favorite guests, one of the people that I've been waiting to have on for some time, and someone I've been following. Also posted some of his work into the Crypto Coin Trader group before. Is Trent Lapinski, and Trent is going to come on with me today. We're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation. We're going to round off on certain subjects and kind of hit home runs on others, I think. And we didn't script this. This is obviously something that I typically try not to do, is be too over-prepared for any interview, because I love the way that I can flow with conversation with people who really have awesome things to talk about. And Trent is one of those people that just has a lot to say. If you're not familiar with Trent, he can be a little bit polarizing at times. There are some people who just, you can see him, he's got some haters and he's got some people that absolutely adore him. And, just like anybody in any space that has a voice, you're going to get one side or the next who has an opinion that you may agree with or you may not agree with. Nevertheless, I tend to usually agree with Trent, and I can't find many instances that I have disagreed with him. I may not have an opinion on certain things, but Trent brings a level of, to me, sensibility. He brings a realistic overview, and also he's very in tune with this socio dynamic of what's happening into our lives through technology. And so we're going to hit a home run on that, as I mentioned earlier. And I also think that you're going to find a little bit of a personality that you may have not heard before if you haven't been following him. So we're going to get to that pretty soon. Let me go ahead and introduce Trent. Trent, come on, man. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great, dude. I'm excited to have you on. You're probably one of the most influential article authors, journalists that I had early on in my Bitcoin days when I was kind of self-discovering what I actually believed about what decentralized meant, right? And for that, I can't thank you enough, man.
Well, thanks for reading it.
No problem, dude. Well, to the audience is listening, as I mentioned before, I've posted things about Trent in the past, but the most important article that I think I ever read early on was actually a December of 2017 article called "Bitcoin is the Revolution." I think that's the name of it, isn't it, Trent?
Yeah.
I should probably
have afternoon.com.
Exactly. I'm going to make sure I post the link again. I probably should have made sure that was the title before we started. But "Bitcoin is the Revolution" is the name of the article, and it kind of just overviews, essentially everything that I have based a lot of my foundations on what cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and blockchain mean to me. And you make a statement in there that it's not a bubble. This is a rebellion. And although it's kind of cliche now, it really was kind of a rallying cry early on, the 2014, 2015, 2016 era, where not everybody believed that. And then, of course, 2017 happened and it looked like a bubble, especially with all the altcoins, Trent. But it really meant a lot to me. And I saw a lot of what you had written prior to that once I saw that article. And that's what really spoke to me. So, of course, I can talk for a very long time. I'm going to hold back. I just kind of want to get your perspective on how did you even start to feel this way? Like, what was it that brought so much attention to this space and really to the decentralized aspect that you felt so compelled to be an author and a journalist about the space?
Well, I'm gonna date myself a little bit here, but I've been working in the tech industry for almost 20 years now. So I started when I was a teenager. Literally started covering Apple news and rumors back in 2001. And it was, watching Apple, almost come out of the verge of bankruptcy. Sure. And kind of become, what they eventually became with the iPod and then later the iPhone and all that kind of thing. I eventually tested out of high school, went to college early, and then dropped out of college to go start to join a startup with two of the former founders of MySpace. We actually were trying to build a YouTube competitor, and we were very close, but it's a whole other topic. I've been in this industry. I've been watching all of these things happen. And I actually wrote an article for Valleywag. It was a Gawker property back, I think, in 2005, where I was talking about, the guys who own MySpace and, how we had to be weary of just putting all of our personal information online. So I was really aware of, what was happening even all the way back then, of where this was going to go, of how all this technology and how everything on the internet was basically being recorded. And we were basically all under surveillance. And, I had my own family and friends, and many people accused me of being paranoid and that's crazy. And, you need to go see a psychologist or whatever, But at the end of the day, after the Edward Snowden leaks, I literally had all those people apologizing to me
Yes.
because now there was proof that, yeah, all of this stuff, we are under surveillance. All of this stuff is being tracked. So I had quite the experience at that startup that I left college for, where, we eventually ended up competing with Google, and Google basically delisted all of our sites off search engines. So I got a front row seat and firsthand experience of just how corrupt, the internet actually is. And it was kind of heartbreaking because that also was right around the time the market crashed in 2008. So the 2008 market crash for me was that was huge. I lost 2 jobs that year. And it had a major impact on my career. My mom eventually ended up losing her house as a result of it. Many of my friends and their parents lost property and assets. So, we watched the economic system collapse in 2008, and the impact from that, it had a ripple effect that honestly, I still am not sure we've completely dealt with. Sure, the government's printed a bunch of money since then, and you can go look at the stock market today, although
Sure.
We had a recent downturn on the Dow, but it's kind of evened out today as of recording this. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but for the most part, the market's higher than it's ever been. There's been occasionally a blip or two, and unfortunately we're probably where we're at right now in 2019. We are riding like a ghost economy. I don't know what to call this. It's propped up by artificial numbers. A lot of the valuations for these companies and these corporations, especially in the tech industry, it's all nonsense. It's, made up. It's numbers on a computer screen. So if that's how we're valuing the world, we've got a real problem. And ultimately, we live in a world now where, data is more valuable than oil. And that's the reality of the economy that we're living in, is that our personal data and our information is more valuable to these corporations than oil that creates energy.
Well said, Trent. And obviously it's usually the other way around, but it feels like the economy's kind of at that spot where we were with altcoins at the end of 2017, overinflated, up for no reason, way too high. We're at a precipice, it really is the truth. Between where we are with big tech, where we are with government, we're seeing, nations right now, whether it be, as small as something like, I don't want to call this event small, but, a smaller nation or I guess territory like Puerto Rico. And, it's obviously a U.S. territory, but going out there protesting the governor, in for many different reasons, and justifiably good reasons. And then we have what we're seeing all over the news in Hong Kong, pushing back against what they consider tyranny, and that over intrusion of China trying to take over and trying to be a little bit more, controlling over that space. They're only 25, 30 years away from actually taking control back of Hong Kong. But, you've been pretty adamant. And of course, for the listeners right now, I want to make sure that you understand there might be some political bias in some of the things that are said here, even by me. But ultimately, we're here for the truth. We're here for liberty. And Trent, I didn't really get to introduce you really well, but besides being a journalist and besides being someone who's been really, really involved in tech and been part of as co-founders and CEOs, and you've been just about everything you can be probably in the tech space, you're also a truth seeker. And truth seekers oftentimes get, as you already alluded to, and even gave an example of people calling you crazy and then coming back to say, I'm sorry. You're a smart guy. You've been successful in your life. You've done things, but you've also been driven by this moral compass that's asked yourself what's actually going on. And not many people have not only the ability to say that to themselves, but even know how to look for the truth. What would you say, in today's day and time, what are some things that people need to do to be able to really take hold of themselves and wake up?
First things first, realize that the media is owned by 6 corporations, and
isn't that crazy?
The same investors who own those corporations, they own other things. So they don't just own the media; they own the military industrial complex. They own Fortune 500 companies.
Oil
They
companies.
own stock in a wide, diversified portfolio of things. So they also are the people who pay for lobbyists and influence the government. So you have to understand that there's a very small group of people who are in control of everything you read and see on the internet, especially if you're using a major social media platform like Twitter, like Facebook. At this point, the narrative, the trending list, all of that stuff is being gamed. All of it's being monetized. All of it is, what they want you to see. We just had the leak, the Google leaker, come out. He was a senior Google engineer. He released all the files online proving that Google does, manipulate their search results for political.
Absolutely. And Trent, hold on one second. Listen, folks, if those of you who are listening and want to know more about this, Trent has posted a lot of this on his Twitter, and he's just at Trent Lapinski is his name on Twitter. Go read his Twitter and go look at some of these screenshots he posted. I'm sorry to interrupt, Trent. I just really want people to understand this is not a joke. This is not pretend. This is real. And he's got the screenshot. I mean, it was all leaked, right? So go ahead, Trent. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I plugged you there so that people could at least go back to your profile to see that this is the truth.
Yeah. So, we keep getting all these leaks. And for me, when I can peer through someone's window, like legally, because someone else did something, and leaked it online, it's like, man, I will peek through that window. I mean, like WikiLeaks, for example, looking into the DNC files, like reading John Podesta's emails. I mean, I on one hand, I don't really agree with Podesta's politics, but I give the man respect for being, probably one of the greatest propagandists to, be alive right now. Yeah. He was instrumental in Bill Clinton's campaign and administration and, almost got Hillary Clinton elected. So being able to peer through his window and read his emails, I mean, we're talking about someone on top of the political game, like being able to read that content, being able to go look at this Google engineers documentation and seeing the ban lists and seeing conservative websites that were banned from Google search results, looking at the terms that were banned from YouTube searches, being able to see that, actually all the stuff that was supposedly a conspiracy is real. That's true. Google is in fact censoring conservative leaning websites and news organizations. Seeing, them censoring information about the Las Vegas shooting, censoring information about the shooting they had on their own campus where, there was a YouTube, content creator who was mad at YouTube for demonetizing them, who showed up at YouTube's office with a gun and started shooting people. So they censored that as well. That was on their ban list. So they're even censoring information about themselves. As well as major shootings, as well as explosions in New York, terrorist attacks. Why a major corporation feels the need to censor people's access to information, especially when there's a major shooting or there's a major political event. I don't understand why they think they have the authority to do that, because this is a corporation. This is an advertising company.
Absolutely. I don't think they understand anything. I think they just do, and they don't give a shit, right? And, and I'm going to tell you, for those of you who lean left and who might be classified as Democrats or liberals, and you know how much, if you're following me, if you know who I am already, I'm very impartial. I do lean conservative in some areas, especially fiscally, but I am for liberty. I believe in individual rights. I know, Trent, there's a lot of similarities in how you feel. I don't want to speak for you. Of course, feel free to disagree with me. But I'll say this. For me personally, I look at this and I say to the left, I say, one day this might not be just conservatives, and a lot of left leaning or liberal people will actually, find some justification in saying, we don't want Trump to get reelected. They're doing this nation a service. So therefore they're not up in arms about this. And you know what? Although I don't agree with you, I can at least I empathize with why you might feel that way or why you might feel justified, because there are certain things that I could probably be convinced of if I was not awake to how dangerous this is. We are not in a situation in America where we should be at any point removed from a conversation. The more we talk, the better, and the more realistic outcomes we're going to have. The less that we hear the other side, regardless of how, even if it's alt-right, far-right, who cares? Let them talk. learn what they're saying, understand how to fight that back. You know, it's okay to not agree with people and to not hate. You don't have to hate these people. Just have a conversation. I know that's going to go out in one ear and out the other, but that's what I've based my principles off of, is just listening. Listen and then talk, right? And anyways, keep going, Trent, because I love this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, people who are listening are probably wondering, you know, what does this have to do with Bitcoin? Well, it has everything to do with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the path out from all this centralization. It's the path away from, you know,
Absolutely.
These major tech companies dictating what reality is. And that's the current reality that we're facing is, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they're deciding for us what is and is not news. They're deciding for us what we can and cannot talk about. They're deciding for us what we can even know at this point. And that is the most frightening thing. So that is centralization. That is what happens when a major company achieves a monopoly and gets a stranglehold on information that's, I mean, we're talking globally here. You know, once that happens, that is what, you know, the top of the pyramid looks like. That's what centralization looks like. So when it comes to Bitcoin and when it comes to cryptocurrencies and it comes to blockchain, it breaks that and shatters that entire framework, because instead of a pyramid, we have little individual nodes or little individual, you know, locations functioning on their own, and they have a level of autonomy. So now San Francisco can have a level of autonomy compared to Chicago, whereas they don't all have to be on the same censored system that Google or Facebook are controlling. Chicago can talk about what interests Chicago, and San Francisco can talk about what interests San Francisco. Yes. That's what decentralization looks like. And that's what blockchain, crypto, and all of these technologies bring. So, you know, we're probably going to continue to talk about more of the problems with centralization in this podcast. But, you know, I just want to make it clear early on that, you know, the reason why we're talking about these problems is to illustrate why we need a solution. And that solution is ultimately decentralization. Whether the actual technology itself is Bitcoin or Ethereum or Akash network or one of these other, you know, projects, or, you know, the Telegram network or whatever, you know, the actual individual project doesn't really matter too much. You know, we're really at the infancy of where decentralized technology is going to be able to take us. So who's going to win? I can't tell you. And could we have centralization later? Entirely possible and probable. But at the infrastructure layer, at the very core foundation of these platforms, there's going to be a level of transparency that we just don't have today with the current tech systems. We just don't know that Google's censoring us until a senior Google engineer, you know, has to almost risk his life to get that information to us. You know, you have the Seth Rich case in WikiLeaks and, you know, the whole Russiagate thing. You know, I mean, personally, I think Seth Rich was a whistleblower, and I think he was responsible for giving that information to WikiLeaks. I've seen enough evidence to suggest that that is a very probable situation, and I've seen very little evidence to counter it. So, you know, you can go on Yahoo News and listen to, you know, whatever nonsense they're talking about, but people need to remember that the mainstream media was implicated in WikiLeaks. So if you trust any of the mainstream media to, you know, tell you the truth about a potential crime or collusion that they were involved in themselves, like, good luck. Like, you know, these people are not going to tell you, hey, yeah, we were involved in the very thing that you're talking about right now. And that's the thing that I think people really first need to understand is the collusion between these major corporations, our politicians, and the media. They work hand in hand together. They're fixing primaries together. They're, you know, setting up debate questions together. They're doing fundraisers through nonprofit foundations and funneling money through them. They're taking, you know, they're taking financial donations from foreign countries. I mean, that's something that we don't talk about enough in the United States, is the fact that, you know, a lot of what's happened here, the reason why our economy is the way that it is, the reason why my rent in San Francisco is some of the highest in the world, is because of currency manipulation from foreign entities, whether it's the Middle East or China or, you know, princes from Saudi Arabia or wherever. Like, you know, there are foreign entities who are manipulating the US dollar and the currency and
Absolutely.
the economy within the United States.
Yeah, and going back to Seth Rich, and
So-
and by the way, like to the audience, like a lot of what Trent just said, that's not an opinion; those are facts, right? Those aren't things that are debatable. Those are actually happening. You may or may not agree with them, as far as is it wrong or right. I tend to think that that's pretty messed up, but some people have no problem with that, and although I may disagree with you, it's important for us to have these conversations, but we're not giving opinions here. Trent is laying out facts. These things happen. It's real. And going back to Seth, obviously that is not per se a fact. As you alluded to, you said that there's nothing that has disproven it to you, and all you've seen is signs that lead towards it being a truth, but that's not confirmable, at least on a factual basis. But talking about Seth real quick, did you actually know him by chance?
No, I did not personally know him.
Okay.
But I do know people who knew him.
Fair. So because I did not know this about you, by the way, so this is newer information. So I'm kind of asking a personal question here, but so do you think it actually was him, like personally, who gave it to
my personal
WikiLeaks?
opinion is there is enough evidence to believe that was a whistleblower. Yes. The technical evidence is actually the evidence that I'm relying on the most, because I don't really trust anything that's in the media, left or right. So I can't tell you based on what's in the media. What I can tell you is within the files that were leaked to WikiLeaks themselves, there was evidence that the leaker used, and I'm using the word leaker here, not hacker, they used a thumb drive. So there was technical evidence that a thumb drive was used to remove those files from a DNC computer.
Wow.
So
you don't ever hear that it was a leaker. You actually hear hacker,
Yeah. And well, it depends on who you're listening to. So
fair.
My other source and the person that I actually trust on this one is actually President Obama. So President Obama, in his final press release as president of the United States, referred to it as the DNC leaker. So these are Obama's words. So I am merely reflecting the words of the former president of the United States. So when I refer to it as a leaker, basically when I say that, that's in agreement with President Obama. So
Fair.
A lot of people,
that's a powerful word.
Probably, you can go back and look at, his final speech as president of the United States. And I think it's between like 7 and 10 minutes into that, his final press conference. And he talks about the DNC situation, and he refers to it, and he talks about whistleblowers, and he talks about WikiLeaks, and he refers to it as a leak, not a hack. So, you've got the previous president of the United States referring to it as a leak in his final press conference. You have the current president who hasn't explicitly stated it was a leak, but definitely does not call it a hack. So, you've got two people that are both, in the know, and they have not referred to it as a hack. So, and there is technical evidence within the documents themselves that indicate it was a thumb drive and that the emails did not travel over the internet, which rules out the possibility potentially of it being a hack. Because if I'm going to remotely hack someone, if I'm going to hack into your computer, I'm going to do that from my living room in San Francisco. I'm not going to physically go to your house and steal your computer. That's stealing a computer. That's not hacking. So
real quick, Trent, why is there such a big difference between hacker versus leaker?
So the difference between hacker versus leaker is a hacker is someone who's going in and is stealing something that wasn't theirs, that they didn't have access to. A leaker is someone who works for that organization, who legally has access to those files or documents, and then reveals them to the media or a journalist like Julian Assange, and provides them to the media to let the world know that a crime or something nefarious has been committed. So a leaker is not a hacker. A leaker is someone who's a whistleblower. They're trying to communicate to the world that, hey, this is what's actually happening. Here's some truth that the public doesn't know.
Yes. And the reason why I asked you to explain that is because to me, when you have a leaker, and I'll even take the other side of this with, with Britney Kaiser and Britney, who did this. Obviously, she was just in, The Great Hack, and, it's on Netflix, et cetera. And although I disagree with her politically, I don't have a problem with her coming out and saying certain things about, this might actually be a little bit, there might be something wrong with this. If you can make this happen, if you can do it this way. And let's give credit where credit's due. Cambridge Analytica was really freaking good at what they did. Really, Absolutely. Really good. And when you can manipulate and when you can target an audience on a level, I have to think whether or not I'm a conservative or if I'm left leaning and I'm a liberal, you don't want this to happen for either side. You don't want one party to have an advantage and to win based off of maybe the intent of, of some really, really powerful and strong people, whether your power lies in a skill set, like being able to reach and to manipulate and to harness. Now, I will say this. I don't really think many people changed their minds in the 2020 or 2016 election. I personally am of the impression, like, look, you didn't go to the polls and struggle whether or not you were going to vote for Hillary or Donald Trump. Like you kind of probably had your mind made up. I'm sure there's a few, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a couple people here and there, but we're talking maybe the 1%, and I mean, on a large level, you may have motivated other people to vote, but that's not really what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the power should not lie in one hand or the other. It should be more decentralized, right? And so Facebook allowing these types of algorithms, and Facebook or Twitter or whoever it might be, allowing this manipulation in any capacity could come back and it could either haunt me or it could help me one day. But either way, it's going to hurt somebody else. And so that's where my passion for decentralization is, that it's the realization that it doesn't matter if I won or if I lost this time. It doesn't need to happen again, because it could go against me next time, or I could get screwed over again next time. And that's, I really find a lot of I fear that, because it's only going to get more powerful. It's only going to get worse unless we do something about it today. Surely you agree with that, Trent.
Oh, absolutely. And going back to, Cambridge Analytica and Britney Kaiser and that whole situation, I was actually one of the first independent journalists to write about Cambridge Analytica. I was not the first to break the story, but I was one of the first people to actually write about it all the way back, I think in February of 2017, a year before the mainstream media even knew who Cambridge Analytica was. I had already written about it. So I figured that out really quickly, that that's what happened with Donald Trump and him winning the election, that was a major factor. So for people listening who maybe haven't seen that documentary yet, it's on Netflix.
It's worth a watch for sure.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. I don't agree with all the politics in it. They left a lot of things out, and they kind of pushed the whole Russia Gate narrative at the end a little bit, which I didn't care for. But and they did completely ignore Seth Rich, what we were just talking about, and they completely ignored Share Blue and Media Matters and all these other organizations that were trying to manipulate things online on the left. So they were just talking about Cambridge Analytica and excluded everyone else, which I don't fully agree with, because honestly, it was an information war. There was two sides to that battle. But anyways,
100%. And the Clinton campaign would have done it had they got there first anyways, but that's not the point.
Correct. The point is, Facebook profited off of what they did with Cambridge Analytica. So that's the first thing, is we need to understand that, despite Facebook's left-leaning politics, they actually did something against their own political beliefs to help the opposing party win, because they valued profit over their own political beliefs. So that's kind of the most ironic thing of this whole situation, for me at least, is seeing that happen. But, people need to they need to remember that Facebook sold them the data, and then Cambridge Analytica was supposed to delete it and then didn't. So yeah, there's definitely, and this speaks to the level of collusion between these tech companies, the media, and companies like Cambridge Analytica. And, for the audience, if you don't know the whole story, Cambridge Analytica basically took data that was compiled from people's Facebook profiles and other online data, did psychological profiling of those individuals to figure out their political bias, then showed them targeted content based on their own political views. So if you were left-leaning, you saw a different set of content than someone who was right-leaning. So they used they basically were able to do predictive analysis using artificial intelligence to be able to understand exactly who someone was based on the data that they themselves provided online to Facebook and these social media companies. So it was essentially a weaponization of your own personal data, then used against you to potentially sway you to either not vote at all, vote for the opposing candidate, or, try, or like I said, convince you not to show up to the polls.
Sure. And that's probably the biggest one.
And they targeted swing states, and they targeted individuals in swing states, and they figured out, hey, I don't have to spend $1 billion like the Clinton campaign. I can spend maybe, $50 million and just reach the people that I know I can influence. That's it. Because they were able to hyper target those individuals based on their psychological profiles and based on the data that they were providing to social media. So
absolutely,
it was crazy what Cambridge Analytica accomplished. I mean, they legitimately helped Trump win the presidency. As you said earlier, how many people were on the fence? We don't really know. But, there was also a professor who, straight up politically left himself, who did an analysis of Google, and he determined that Google swayed the 2016 election by something like over 2.5 million votes, upwards of that. He actually said that's a minimum. So there was potentially up to like 5+ million votes were swayed by how Google manipulated the election. So people need to keep in mind the 2016 election was manipulated by Cambridge Analytica. It was manipulated by Google. It was manipulated by Twitter. Were there some Russian botnets? Probably. And I personally think I found and came across some of these Russian botnets. They were out there. Did they have a significant influence on the election? I would argue it's far less than the influence that Google had. I would argue it's far less than Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. I would argue it's far less than, anything the mainstream media would convince you over the last 2 years, 3 years with Russiagate. That whole thing was, this is McCarthyism. These are not actual things. There's plenty of things that I don't agree with Russia on. And I would love for us to actually have a conversation about that. But making things up that they didn't really have that much power or control over and ignoring the people who did, I just don't understand that.
I completely agree with you. Trent, I mean, just even listening to the way that you speak about this, I know, because I've followed your work, I know that you're where you stand politically, right? I feel like you are for liberty. You are a libertarian. I mean, that's how I would perceive you by just reading what you write. Again, feel free to correct me. But, when you Google yourself, do you know what comes up? Alt-right. Google calls you the alt-right.
Yes.
That's nuts.
Google decided that I am alt-right because I believe it was Will Wheaton wrote a smear piece against me where he alluded to me being alt-right. And then Google took that and, used it as justification to autocorrect my name to alt-right when you search for my name on Google.
No, it literally shows up as alt-right.
Yeah, so I literally wrote an article and attached it to my Medium profile. We'll see how long it lasts because Medium's been deleting a lot of my content lately. But,
have they really?
Yeah, they deleted my Seth Rich article. That was 2 years old.
How? So, well, I mean, why?
They didn't specify. They changed their terms of service and then deleted it. And they deleted a bunch of other journalist content as well, who had been writing about Seth Rich, and then buried the tag and the search page. So when you search for Seth Rich on Medium, you don't get any results now. You have to dive into the archive. And now the tag is also mostly disabled. So they're just burying stuff. They're just deleting content. They don't
copy and paste it. Copy and paste it. Repost it, man.
I did. It's been reposted on my website, techpost.io. So I reposted that, and then I actually wrote a piece about how they deleted my first piece, kind of calling Medium out for it. And then Medium deleted that within 24 hours. So you can't even talk about being censored on Medium without being censored. That's where we're at in 2019.
And here's the problem with Google. And and like everything you're saying, Trent, resonates in me at a high level. I agree with just about everything you've said so far, and the things that you've said in the past. There's a lot of synergy and in our thought processes, at least. And I think you think at a very high level, and you're very uniquely qualified at this point to have an opinion. Everybody's got an opinion, but to me, when you say something, it's just because I know why you're like, based off of your work, your journalistic integrity and the reasons why you do this. I mean, nobody likes to sit there and get censored by Google. If you just wanted to get popular or get famous, you would write about things that people want to hear about, not things that people don't want to hear about or that are unpopular. And so I really applaud that ability for you to seek that truth, as you call yourself, not just a truth seeker. You are a truth seeker. You don't have to call yourself that. That's literally what you do on a regular basis. But we both sit here, and I'm using Chrome right now. I use Chrome. I use Gmail. I use Google Docs at times. And I mean, I'm prone to keeping things in my drive, I mean, I'm very, very careful what's in there, obviously, for obvious reasons. But, the convenience of what Google allows keeps me coming back, keeps me using Chrome. I mean, and I have the access. I have Brave on my my dash. I mean, on my pinned on my taskbar on my PC. But I'm still using Google for most of my everyday stuff because they've made it so easy and so convenient. And for that ease and convenience, they also know everything that I let them know about me. Everything I put on the internet, anything I write in Chrome, it's all registered. It's all there. Like, how do we get out of this? Like, I mean, obviously it's an individual thing, but on a high level, can Google even be defeated?
Yes, I think Google can be defeated. I mean, first and foremost, some regulations would definitely help. The government probably needs to step in at some point because, they've basically gone rogue. I don't know how else to put it. Google as a corporation, I mean, they're arguably not even really an American company anymore in terms of their politics and their ideology. They're operating in this, globalist perspective. And, I absolutely, admire people who believe they're citizens of the world. And, I think that's a great concept. But at the end of the day, there are laws, there is a constitution in the United States of America. Like, we do have to kind of respect that. So the fact that, you've got a major multi-billion-dollar tech organization who, it is now proven fact that they are manipulating our search results and force-feeding us information that potentially is not true, that's a major problem. The fact that they're smearing people like me with, recommended search results, which is politically motivated and also not true. I'm not a member of the alt-right. It's ridiculous. They should not have the ability to do that. They shouldn't have the power to do that. There's no reason for what is essentially an advertising company. People need to understand that. Google, they don't make money off of anything other really than advertising. That is the bulk of their revenue. That is how they make money. They are an advertising company. So people need to understand that this is not a tech company. This is an advertising company, first and foremost. So with that in mind, do you really want to trust an advertising company to tell you what the truth is? And yeah, I mean, when you put it in that perspective, it's like, well, no, of course I don't want to trust an advertising company to tell me what the truth is. And that is the reality of what Google is. So, they probably need to be broken up. I mean, if the government would come in and say, hey, an advertising company can't own a video hosting platform and a search engine, like owning those three things doesn't make sense together, then that would probably be one good solution. Another solution is we build software that is equal or greater than what Google has built and decentralize it so that they can't get access to our information. So there is the possibility of doing that. There are blockchain technologies, and I've interviewed nearly 100 different CEOs or CTOs of major blockchain companies in the last year and a half or so. And this technology is being built. These decentralized networks are being worked on. This software, it exists. I just interviewed Greg Suri. Like, he's building it at Akash Network, and it's real. They're building a cloud provider alternative to Google Cloud and Amazon. And, it starts with that infrastructure layer of building a decentralized platform so that we can store our data in the cloud without having to hand it to these major cloud providers. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what the cloud is it's just someone else's computer. So in this case, and when you're using any Google product, you're just handing all of your data to the computer that is Google. And Google is running artificial intelligence against all of it, so they can analyze it and do things with it in real time. The difference in where we were in the internet, even 5-6 years ago, is they couldn't do anything with our data in real time because they didn't have the technology to do anything with it. So they couldn't censor us in real time. They couldn't, delete our posts. They couldn't figure out, this is actually trending. We had really, really dumb algorithms back then. So, they did very basic things and they could only do basic things. Well, those days are over. We now have artificial intelligence that is actually capable of learning. We have artificial intelligence that is actually capable of analyzing all of this data in real time. So the difference in what we're seeing today versus what we were seeing just even 4 or 5 years ago is the fact that these tech companies now have the technology to react in real time. While we're having a conversation, they can be analyzing it as it's happening and react to it immediately, serve you an ad, steal your data or whatever. They have the ability to do that now in real time. So that's what's changed, and that's what's made all of this technology that much more intrusive. That's what's made this surveillance state that much more intrusive. And it's to the point now where kids don't even want to play outside. They just literally check out, go play Fortnite, and that's the world they live in, because the real world, they're completely under surveillance and they know it. Imagine being a 14-year-old today. You've grown up your entire life, completely under surveillance by your parents, by your school, by all these major corporations. They know everything about these kids. Their entire lives have been completely documented. And it's frightening because you can't even get out from underneath it. Because if you try to speak the truth or you try to speak an opinion, they'll literally just delete your channel. There was that girl, Soph, who had her YouTube channel. She had almost 1 million followers, just deleted because she started talking about politics. So, they're literally deleting children's YouTube pages now. That's where we're at as a society. That's where we're at as a culture, is children can't even talk about politics on the internet. They'll get their YouTube channels deleted. So that's unfortunately just kind of where we're at right now. So, there's this crazy disconnect of what is reality and what we're told. And if you believe the official narratives, you are doing yourself and your country a great disjustice by believing the nonsense that we're being told. I'm going to tell a quick story here about something that just happening. This just happened, recently. This relates to the Google leaker. So on August 5th, I look out my window and there's a news helicopter, there's police sirens, there's all this crazy activity. And I'm like, what is going on? Something major. This is an all hands on alert. You've got all this activity going on. I'm going on Twitter trying to see what's happening. I go on this app called Citizen, which kind of tells you when crimes are committed or reported in your area. And I'm checking all my local journalists to see, on Twitter, what's going on. And they're reporting that there's a suspicious object found. They had to evacuate 3 blocks of Valencia Street in San Francisco. This was in the middle of the afternoon, right during commute hour. I'm literally texting my fiance, hey, part of your commute, has been shut down. You're going to have to go around, maybe go to a different BART station. It was a major thing. This all took place over 3 hours. Then all of a sudden, the news says, the bomb squad went in, checked the suspicious object, and it's not a threat. Everything's fine. And we never heard from it again. Well, we just found out just on Wednesday, this past week, as of recording this, that the reason why this 3-area block was shut down, the reason why snipers were on the roof, the reason why bomb-sniffing dogs were brought in, was because Google and Google executives called in a swatting attempt against the Google whistleblower who submitted the documents to Project Veritas. So he did not meet a deadline to return his laptop to Google. So they had the police, bomb squad, snipers, news organizations all go after this guy to intimidate him because he was trying to submit documents to the Justice Department. So he was trying to get this laptop and these files to the antitrust division of the Justice Department. And in an attempt to stop him from doing that, Google essentially swatted him by sending the police, the San Francisco police force, I believe the FBI may have been involved as well, and tried to intimidate him into not giving those files to the Justice Department by basically filing a false police report. Meanwhile, the news media is telling us a suspicious object is found and, is completely lying to the city of San Francisco. So, this is when these kind of situations present themselves. The reality was it was an intimidation tactic against a senior Google engineer by Google executives. And they literally called in law enforcement to intimidate this guy. So that is what actually happened. What we were told was that there was a suspicious object. I mean, they evacuated an entire theater that was nearby this guy's house. I mean, this was no joke. So why were all of those people inconvenienced? Why did the city of San Francisco put that many resources into this? I mean, even if what the Google executives had said was true, where they claimed that this whistleblower was, a threat to himself and suicidal, sure, and they were saying he needed a wellness check. Let's just say for a moment that was true. It's not true, but let's say for a moment that is true. Did they really need a news helicopter? Did they really need the bomb squad?
They did not.
Did they really need all of these resources for, we're talking maybe 2 to 4 police officers max to handle that kind of situation.
So Trent, what were they doing? What do you think they were doing?
I think on one hand, this was an intimidation tactic. And I think on another hand, this may have also been a possible attempt to get him to react in a certain way that would have justified the police possibly causing harm to him and put his life in danger.
I agree with both sides.
Yeah, there have been incidences where someone has called the police on someone with the intention of the police going and harming that person because they know that person might react to the police negatively, especially if they've done nothing wrong. So, there are also people who have committed suicide by purposely committing crimes or doing certain things that they know the police will kill them because they don't want to pull the trigger themselves and would rather have the police kill them. So this is a very, very serious issue that could have had very different results had that whistleblower had he reacted in a different way. It could have ultimately ended with his life.
And I want to make sure the audience knows there's going to be a lot of people who potentially may not necessarily agree, and that's okay, folks. Like we just ask, do the research, and Trent speaking from a position where he has spent a lot of time and energy looking into this situation, and he's come up with these conclusions, and he's saying them. A lot of it is still opinion, but some of it is not opinion. Some of it is factually based. So go out and seek the truth, seek it. If Trent's wrong, come show him how he's wrong. Right? He's not opposed to having a conversation about this. I mean, I don't mean to speak for you again, Trent, but I assume that's the case. Like if you think that Trent is wrong, well, go do the research. Go spend hours and days trying to figure out what actually happened. Talk to these people. I mean, not to mention, how many blocks away were you from where this all happened at?
It was about a mile from me. I saw it out my window. I watched it all happen. Yeah.
That's insane. Look, we could go on and on about this. And before we do get on the next rant, because like I told you before we did this interview, is that you're a really interesting personality. I hope that you're willing and enjoyed this enough where you want to come on again and speak to the audience and give some opinions this way. And look, if you do not agree with Trent, I will say it again. Go do your research. Let's find out. Like, come talk to him. Hit up on Twitter. I promise you this much. He's not going to run away from it. I promise you. But Trent, before this slows down, I always do this thing. I like to do this quick fire for people, who come on the show. I like to ask about a series of 4 or 5 questions, sometimes 6, depending on how you answer one question and the next. Sometimes I'll add another one on there. But are you ready for quick fire? I didn't even tell you this was going to happen. So let's just have a little bit of fun. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1, favorite movie.
That's a hard one.
You could pick 2 if you have to.
I'm gonna have to go with probably The Matrix, just kind of out of like default, because it.
My last guess said the same thing.
Yeah, it's probably a toss up between that and like Pulp Fiction. So,
two great answers, by the way. All right, best personality in blockchain.
ooh, that's a tough.
Besides Trent Lapinski, of course. Can't pick yourself.
Gosh, I gotta go with Greg Asuri right now because I just interviewed him,
Sure.
and I just love what he's working on.
Does Bitcoin survive the next 100 years?
Technically, yeah, it should survive the next 100 years. Will
relevant,
it be
though?
the
Relevant.
Facebook or Google? I don't know.
Fair. I wish I wouldn't use the word relevant because I'm about to say it again. How long until blockchain is politically relevant?
It's already politically relevant.
Give me an example.
I mean, governments around the world are already starting to use and implement blockchain technology. There are companies that straight up sell products to the government for blockchain. Decentralization has a number of political benefits in turn, especially if you could build a blockchain system for voting.
Absolutely. And so, although I don't disagree that it is, technically relevant, I probably, maybe I should have even asked the question a little bit more, but like they're on stage, actually debating whether or not we're going to go to this or not, right? So, but I see this happening hopefully within the next couple election cycles.
Yeah, it's happening behind the scenes right now, but I think in the long term, we'll probably be talking about this technology on the political stage.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, last one, and it is. Hopefully, you're familiar with the book or the movie at this point. But Ready Player One, is it going to be a reality within 50 years?
Oh, I hope not. I mean, there are a lot of things in that movie that unfortunately are already true. So
sure,
we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely we're definitely already in a dystopian cyberpunk reality. So I imagine it's probably just going to get worse.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't end any podcast without giving a Jean-Luc Picard reference. And there was there's an episode of In the Next Generation. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. You probably don't know that, but in that there's I think it's called The Shining Light, or the Light Within, or the Inner Light Within, or something along those lines. And this guy, Jean-Luc Picard, who's the captain of the Federation Starship Enterprise, and obviously that's actually played by Sir Patrick Stewart. He actually gets like captivated by this probe out in space, and they send him to a whole nother universe, and he lives a whole lifetime within this, I guess you could say, like within this like 15-minute time frame. And I wonder like if that's what one day we'll be able to live in this like exaggerated time frame and condensed down into 15-20 minutes, because that would be really cool. I mean, I don't know how that would happen, but it's probably just as likely as time travel, because essentially that's what it's doing. But the blockchain allows this type of imagination, I believe, on a level that nobody's been able to really have, or at least take seriously. So whether it's Ready Player One, or whether it's living within another lifetime, or whatever it might be, consciousness being stored up in space, there's so many different things. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But I can tell you this much: I want a future with blockchain and decentralization way more than I want one without it, right? And that's not just that's probably an understatement. And I can imagine you say the same thing. But Trent, where can we find you? Where can we follow you at? And are there any things that we missed?
Yeah, so you can find me at Trent Lapinski on Twitter, Facebook, Medium, for as long as they'll keep letting me publish, and then also at techpost.io. That's where I'm publishing a lot of my new content now, and I also have my own podcast. And just, one thing that I just kind of want to end on is, ultimately, this all comes down to the fact that the banking system is what controls the world. And I just want people to understand that. It's who controls the money and who controls that system. Those are the people who are in charge. It's the investors. It's the bankers. It's actually not the CEOs. The CEOs work for the investors and the bankers. So if you want to understand how this whole thing works, and understand why we need solutions where someone can decentralize that, where all the power and all the money in the world is not in a few people's hands, and you have the ability to create your own companies, start your own businesses, and create your own futures that aren't necessarily dictated by a banker, an investor, or a world government. That's what decentralization and blockchain technology can potentially do. That isn't to say all blockchain technology will be used for good. I'm sure some of it might be used for some evil things, unfortunately. But if we can take this technology in its infancy now and build in that transparency and build in all of the things that we need to make sure that we at least get some of our rights back, that's a hell of a lot better than the current situation where, you can get smeared on Google like I have been. You can have your articles deleted off Medium. Like my articles have been deleted, and you can get shadow banned on these platforms. So you can't even reach your own followers. So I'd much rather live in a world where I at least own my followers. They can still follow me. I own some of my data. I kind of accepted that I might not own all of it, but if I can at least own some of it, that's better than living in a world where I don't own any of my own information.
That's very, very well said. Obviously the old saying goes, who writes history, Trent? Who's the one who writes the history?
The victor.
The winners. Yeah, the victor, right? And, we've been living in that world for a very long time. Blockchain allows that to cease. Let's get the truth out there, and that's what, whether it's you or me or anybody, on the left or right, your voice should not be suppressed because somebody disagrees with you that has more power than you. And I'll stand by that, outside of the fact that unless you're threatening to kill somebody, well, that's not really a product of free speech, in my opinion. But at most everything else is. And even if I disagree, or if it's something that I find even sometimes offensive, I'd much rather someone be able to say it and know that that's what they're saying rather than not hear it, because it's going to be out there one way or the next. Now, before we get into another subject, Trent, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I really, really enjoyed our conversation today, brother. And I look forward to the next time that we chat.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, Bitcoin Radio. We will see you next time. As you know, the cryptoverse, it belongs to all of us. Take care of it. It's our responsibility. If we don't do it, who will? The government? Nah, of course. That's not what we're looking for. We want to do it. We'll see you soon.